Welcome to Clothing Culture. I'm Emily Lane.
I'm Bret Schnitker.
We speak with experts where we explore the global dynamics that shape trends in the fashion industry.
Brought to you by Stars Design Group, a global production and design house with over 30 years of industry experience.
Well, today we are discussing the future of 3D design in the fashion industry. We are here with Sharon Lim, co-founder and CEO of Browzwear. She is an absolute pioneer in the industry. Hello, Sharon.
Hello, Emily. Hello, Bret. Thanks for having me on your podcast. Thank you.
It's so wonderful to have you here. Bret, you have known Sharon for quite some time.
Yeah, I think we started exploring 3D design about 9 years ago, and I feel like that's a long time ago, but holy smoke, I think Browzwear goes back a lot further than that. I feel like, we were, in this industry, I've heard a statistic, I can't back it up, but I think less than 2% of the industry really heavily utilizes 3D design. And, as we started working down, overcoming challenges with clients and, helping them visualize the final result of things, we moved from kind of a 2D platform to 3D. And Sharon was instrumental and her company instrumental in doing that. We explored a number of different organizations that were offering services to that degree. But, at that time and still today, the interface, the understanding of that relationship between artist, vision, and technology was really firmly implanted at Browzwear, and we feel really comfortable, and feel really grateful to have Browzwear as a partner in the industry.
So, Sharon, where in this space of 3D, with regards to the fashion industry, where is it sitting today from where it started?
Yeah, I think when I personally have been in the industry for almost 18 years. Prior to that being with a company called Tommy, and then moving and just seeing the change in the industry. But I think we moved from first 3D for fashion was introduced and it was very disruptive because unlike the fast-moving consumer products, other CMGG, hard goods and all, 3D was quite late for apparel simply because it didn't, people didn't feel that you could touch, you could feel, and so how do you make decisions when you can't touch it? So pretty much, while the rest of the world moved on, industrial engineering moved on with 3D at the heart of all product development, design and development itself, apparel really just stuck on with 2D. So that was the time that we came from a very 2D driven type of workflow, a lot of tags, sketches, and then try our best, make a lot of samples, and if it still doesn't make all the stakeholders, just keep repeating the process again and again. It's at the end of the day, it's really about communication. That's what the industry, that's what a 2D workflow was driven. However, when I came into the industry, we could see that if you replicated what the engineering industry did with 3D and brought it in, then visualization would pretty much bring objectivity to the process. And when you drive your product development around 3D, all of a sudden no one's guessing what this is all about, what the word 10 inch per or 10 stitch per needle, what does it all mean, but it's definitely moved along, and we've had to be, evangelists, advocate for this type of way of working of the 3D digital workflow, because the ultimate goal is that when the industry is able to move into that, then I think what we'll have on our hand is really just a more sustainable apparel workflow.
I think all things work really well together. It was funny, we had a interview with Valentin Karabanov. I think he's a colleague of yours for many years out of Israel. And it's funny listening to him struggle from his roots of being this tailor in a tactile environment and him working in 3D, specifically Browzwear for, 14 or more years, since 2004, I think. And him interfacing with a designer, and the designer had more faith in the execution of a 3D design going straight to the tailor shop and going right on the runway than Valentin did as the designer. I mean, that just seems like, it's a mind shift that I think our industry's got to go through, right?
Yep. And I think that we are, we've moved from, last couple years, I would call it, the early adopters, where you had a time of innovators from the industries, and then to the time where there are early adoption of the industry. And now we are really at what I call the early mass, all right, where people have seen success on the left, on the right, among their peers, and they figured it out, okay, we can do this. But we are at this early phase, which doesn't mean that everyone's going to figure this out immediately. They're still going to, in a way, the technology itself, the software itself is plug and play, but the impact that it makes, which is where we have to plan and partner with yourself, over the years as well, companies like yourself, is the impact of it is something that we need to plan for the best digital, I think I call it an experience, a digital product experience, all right, needs to be enhanced. But the great thing is we do see people adopting, and now it's helping them to start that journey, to bring impact through helping them plan and understand how do you get into the journey, and it must always impact the business at the end of the day. You don't want to get into a software for the sake of doing a software. Because if you look at the 2D digital workflow where people try to put many, many different things together, AI, Photoshop, and all that, all for the sake of communication. And in the same way, and even though the impact of it's not always the most positive, it was the only tool they had. So when you move into a better tool, and you still bring people through the change, I find that change management is best when you bring impact to the table for all the stakeholders. So this is the part, I think, as we reach early mass adoption, is to help people to understand the impact, derive some goals out of that, so that then we can put a plan that stakeholders can really take ownership of and just drive it.
Yeah, I mean,
this is what I've seen you've done.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the industry itself is super accelerating. We talk about evolution, not revolution at our company. Revolution tends to be bloody, but evolution can also be, it has sometimes physical forces to create that evolution. And certainly as we see COVID, oh my God, the launch of digital conversation in all aspects. I mean, we're talking Zoom today, the connectivity, the change in how we're doing business style, the way that we're communicating design, interpretation of design has exploded, and people are starting to say, hey, what about this digital thing? And it's funny, you go, well, I've been doing this for 14 years plus. Hey, I already know that answer. But, I think when you talk about economics also in your conversation, that's super impactful. I say in other conversations, America lives in a microwave society. We want everything fast. Well, in the old way, when we went down this process of, hey, let's sketch out a design, let's have tech do all this work, let's have a fit sample and another fit sample and another, the time that it took to actually get to perhaps a place that you were really comfortable was months. Today, if you trust the system and input it correctly, those many months can be condensed into days even today. And you throw in this whole additional conversation about sustainability. Everyone is talking about sustainability. One of the things that, in an industry that wastes 92 million tons a year of fabric, and we have conversations, in this whole development process, there's a lot of fabric that goes to waste in the development process before even production begins. And if you can visualize, you can have conversation around the executed item in a digital space, you're also saving a hell of a lot of waste in that process.
Right. Yeah, and I think that it's the process, the entire workflow to go from one end to the next end presents, there are so much opportunity when you start to move into digital. You start to see possibilities. Yesterday, a client in Europe, they are an ODM in Europe, and what was interesting is that they posted how they created a athletic wear, and I'm not sure, maybe it's for private label or it's their own private label, I'm not sure. But they posted on LinkedIn, on their social media, and talks about how they created it, and they put it on animation, so they were obviously visual selling it as well. All right, within, if I'm not wrong, all without samples in 3.5 hours. Now,
Wow.
Amazing.
how do you do
Now
that?
that's disruptive.
Yeah.
If we could just take Valentin Karabanov's deal and only sell digital fashion, then we're good. We don't have to make anything at a factory.
We would just be sitting
we
here
just
in digital
download
clothes
it,
right
wear it
now.
on Zoom. That's the way to go.
And
it's kinda
it's really
crazy.
interesting, but I think that there's still gaps. It's once you tie any type of change to the economic impact, there can be some longevity and continuity to keep evoluting, the evolution going. And I don't think change doesn't mean revolution. The truth is this.
No,
change
that can be
really
painful.
means change really means evoluting. But there are some companies that, maybe because of size, a bit, less stakeholders involved and all that, they can really bring this much, much faster, and I think that's important. But there is still generally, I think, a lack of understanding of what 3D brings to the table and should lead to. All right, so some people are still at the stage where we call the DPC, which is digital product creation, and they have not really moved on from creating yet. Not really moved on from creating into more of the other purposes that they could reuse what they've created and move, and then make an impact and change the way they sell, change the way they really even develop and communicate. And I think not really. Okay, there are two last extreme frontiers, okay? The manufacturing end, and then I think with consumer engagement. But you do see activities, digitalization, or some type of technologies that are impacting the two polarized end right now, consumer-facing and manufacturing. I think that I would say that maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see, where one end consumer all the way to manufacturing can actually be connected. And I think that is the goal. There's still some gaps, but we're definitely heading down that direction, which is great. Because when that happens, you really can then change the way you sell digital before you make anything. And then there are really manufacturers or supply chain partners that are able to connect in digitally and know exactly how to make what you've presented to them, and then with IoT, AI, and all that, be able to quickly produce on demand. I think that is that frontier that we are leading into.
And I think it's accelerating for sure. I think it's an amazing future we've got.
Absolutely. These are conversations we are absolutely having among our clients and prospective clients each day. You both spoke of earlier in this conversation, evolution, not revolution. We do know that trying times often call for evolution and are a very good time to see that come about.
Yeah, I'd like to say adversity breeds creativity. No, adversity breeds technology.
Yeah,
today it breeds technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, looking at the landscape of this industry through this pandemic, companies have downsized. Many of the fashion design teams were condensed. Many designers were were let go as a result of the downsizing. And so I'm curious, Sharon, your thoughts on the future of 3D and people, designers perhaps looking to adopt a new skill during this time, as well as, companies now we're leaner, we need to be more efficient. Do you see a rise in adoption due to pandemic times?
Well, and you also mentioned gaps. That's an interesting point of view because the education gap, has been a challenge for a long time because
Right.
schools, the technology, even though it's been around for you for 14 years, we've talked a number of times that the educational system is not really kind of fully embraced it and have teachers that can teach it.
Right. I think technology is really, Bret, I think we had the discussion when I first met you. And I said change or any type of transformation is first about people. And then when people are on board, when people are changed, then they will change the way that they work, which is basically process, right? And then only for that, once you decide, then that's when technology really, you see the value that you create with the technology that you just embark on. So yes, it's unfortunate that crisis like COVID had to happen, but it definitely brought about a change as people, I think, face the crisis. The digital age, people start to realize that, hey, this is the digital age and we need to get on board with that. Now, what we can do is, I think, for us anyway, in Browzwear, what we tried definitely, as soon as COVID happened, I remember sometime last year around this time, maybe a month earlier, March, when we saw this, and much as we couldn't imagine that the world was shut down in the next 2 quarters the way it did.
Who could?
Yeah. What we thought of was this is an excellent opportunity to really start bringing up the learning platform to the industry to help them to learn. What we can do is to help people to learn. Will there be an uprise? Has there been an uprise of people who wants to learn? There is. But we could foresee a bit of economic hardship. And so what we launched was the Indie program, where we started actually issuing licenses to many independents and many of them, unfortunately, were in the pool who lost either their job or were on furlough, or graduates who really couldn't find a job at that time. So we launched this program to really help people to take this time, at least invest their time. While they invest their time and they change, what we could do is support the change by providing the licenses for them to get learning. And then also our team was amazing. They quickly put together all their knowledge and then did a project on and created the Browzwear University and launched it very, very quickly, putting the best of everything that we have together. And also what I meant by the best is just the understanding of how people learn. And while the trainers used to get on the road and teach people, with the best of the experience of how you learn, we put all that together in the Browzwear University, launched it, I think, at the end of May, and allowed people to just continue their education. I'm happy to say that, we're almost a year since we launched, and that education that has supporting the people is still continuing to happen. I'm really happy to see all the uptake. And Bret, you were talking about the school system. It's not so much the system. It goes back again to people. It goes back again to people changing. And with all people changing, it's always, I have a day job. This is the way I've been working, and I have got to keep doing because that's what I'm paid to do. And sometimes until I'm not paid to do a certain not paid to do
Revolution
it. That's when I have time to really step back, and that's when I have time to then think about how should I teach or what should I do. And what we are really happy with, and we've had a lot of feedback also from schools that quickly started to work with Browzwear and all, that was that even the Browzwear University have really assisted and helped them bring digital into the schools as well. That we are really happy with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It's funny, every day around here I have a situation, life is that way. Things just come across the table. And we have a lot of young, I'm on the other side of the generation gap, I guess now, young people, they're around here. And I'm like, how the hell do I fix this? And they're like, oh, let me go YouTube it. They watch some episode and they come back like an expert and they fix it. And I think, your team has so intelligently organized this whole Browzwear University in such a way that people are used to learning in this way with master classes out there and, YouTube tutorials. I mean, this is a way that people are really learning to do things today. And I think it's a really insightful idea.
Yeah, I think it is a wonderful initiative, and I know many fashion designers that have taken advantage of your Browzwear University. So I might have to do so as well,
There
Bret.
you go. Master class for you.
Please sign you up. Yeah.
We at Stars did a very similar kind of outreach initiative when COVID hit. We wanted to continue fostering opportunity for designers, and so we launched United Culture, and so as a result of that, and this is a global fashion design community, and many of the designers that we've brought on board are taking advantage of your program. I'm curious, Sharon, as the world starts to shift back to normalcy, do you think that these designers will, kind of remain independent? Do you think they'll get the call back to their big fashion houses? How do you see this kind of shifting the entire ecosystem of the fashion and apparel industry?
It's interesting that prior to COVID, I think it was 2019, I heard an online interview by a graduate of FIT, and it went something like that. Not a word for word, but it went something like that. I don't want to graduate and go into a bigger company. Rather I'll think about starting something on the side of my own. And the question was why? I mean, you are a graduate. Why wouldn't you go into a bigger fashion brand, work for a couple of years? And it's like, no way. Everything that is done, I've heard enough from my friends that they are not really involved in design. All they are involved in is sketching and making coffee, all right? And and making copies, and pinning boards. There's no way.
And probably making coffee if it's a late night too. Give them credit.
Yeah.
They'll probably do copies and coffee.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And there's no way. I don't think that's what I learned. I paid for my education. I'm not going back to pinning boards. Now that was very insightful for me to hear. But also, I also felt that, I think since 2010, every crisis in the last 2 decades, one thing I noticed is it brings about a rise in the gig economy.
That's right.
All right. And where people start to say, well, how do I, do I only work? Can I democratize work? And that's what I've seen in the last 2 decades. So I think even with the current crisis and all, this acceleration of the gig economy will happen. Now, this is really interesting because now we can connect in. And I think companies are also more well aware of the fact that it's not about seeing people come to work, clock in, clock out anymore. Those days are kind of passé. So much as we may return to a economic stability, more improvements in economic, and I want that to happen. But I also believe that this will come from a lot of people who will be freelancing, who will be doing that type of non-traditional kind of employment contract. I do see that coming. I
agree. I think,
happening.
the old days of corporate America, there was this, I think, probably misplaced thought that there was this security that you went and worked for a number of years, you finished with a pension, you got your old watch, and life was there. That that kind of reality has not been around for a number of years. And I think COVID brings to light, especially in designers, as we've had a lot of conversation with designers, they were some of the first to be let go. They're like, hey, we're going to let you go. We're going to survive, and then maybe you'll come back on. They call it furlough, to your point, which is a polite way of saying you're out. Maybe you'll come back. And I think gig economy also answers a lot of those questions. Look, I realize I cannot depend on these big corporations to keep me employed if things go wrong. I'm going to try to build a business to a degree myself to be able to pay my bills and build my reputation and build that notoriety.
Stay inspired.
In a lot of different in our industry, a lot of different companies, these designers are really unknown. They build all the beautiful designs for an organization, and, whatever the thing is above the door is the brand, but there's a lot of designers behind the scenes that are creating those. And I think that's, a critical deal. You talk about, this new gig economy and this new gig community. The other thing that I think is interesting, and I spoke to Lena about it, so I probably am going to get it wrong because it's been a few years. My brain cells aren't what they used to be. But she was talking about the uniqueness of how you've had this kind of open arm network for Browzwear. She talked about Python language and how the ability to have this open platform created this constant thought of evolution in Browzwear. Like, it continues to evolve with new ideas. It welcomes the community in to present new ideas. Is that still continuing? Have you seen that on the rise lately with all the different new innovations that are going on?
The open platform, as we call it, which is basically putting Browzwear in a framework of openness. All right, was something that we started a few years, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But when we came together, when we launched Browzwear, this was always on our roadmap that this is what we would do. Never play a closed game, because when you play a closed game, you're playing on your own. But when you open up your arms and you open up yourself, and you are able to put your technology open, then basically what happens is you allow for acceleration and bringing, I think, people, tech guys, into the fashion industry. I think it's not just the technology itself, but it's the fact that we actively put a team of people to basically seek out partnership to find people from other industries who might be interested to come in and show them this industry, bring also them to our clients to show that this is what brings innovation. I think this is what brought a lot of innovation to fashion. And today we have the term, someone coined the term fashion tech. Look, it was never there before. I mean, in the past when I first came in and when you talk to people, even up to 10 years ago, they will tell you things like fashion, it's archaic. There's no way I'm coming into fashion.
Yeah.
It's archaic. Nothing's changed since Adam and Eve, and there was only one good tailor, and it's God himself. But since then, nothing's really changed. And you hear of fashion being associated like that. So to be able to partner and bring and advocate and build a community of innovators, tech innovators who are willing to step into fashion, and now there's this term that's coined fashion tech. For me, it's just to see yet another milestone that we've crossed, another gap that's been bridged, and that's really very exciting. So
for me, it's a super sexy term. I think that's awesome. We have a foundation of talent and technology here, and when I hear fashion tech, I'm like, yay, good, because that combination needs to happen for sure in our industry.
So we are definitely continuing on this whole open platform. In fact, maybe on the website, we're taking technology company through we introduce them to fashion. We get them talking to a few people. We give them advice on their tech, and then they allow them to use our technology and keep doing what, whether it's integration, whether it's embedding, they continue to do that. And then when it comes to a point when they're ready, we really bring them out through the Partners Program, introducing them officially on our website or, on social. and even to our clients. And that, I think, is something that we're going to continue. If anything at all, we're just expanding in this, continuing to expand in this area.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
like building your network.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of other fashion technologies, we are seeing a lot more information coming out about 3D virtual fitting rooms, augmented reality, virtual reality in this space. Sharon, how do you see this evolving in the coming years? And is it going to become more a part of our reality?
I think it is already. I've heard of, when we brought some ARVR online showcase platforms into the industry, just talking to their CEO a week ago, and the uptake is there. They've really experienced that uptake, and simply because people are still kind of locked down. There are countries that are still on lockdown, so the best way to still present your line, and the ARVR is really cool, very immersive way of showing, and they are seeing an uptake of their business as well in fashion. So I think that I mentioned earlier on that there will the two polarized end, the two end of it is manufacturing and consumers. So the more actually, and they create the push and pull effect. So the more different technology goes into manufacturing to bridge the gap, all right, towards product and design, and the more that consumers are also engaging digitally, the more you can actually connect this consumers to manufacturing. So we are definitely continuing to promote technology in two ends, because we know that once there are uptakes and there's a pull effect, once people, consumers and manufacturing engage with apparel, digital apparel, you basically have the ability to bring them closer together. And the
accuracy of that rendering is just kind of amazing. I remember, again, this goes back a while with Lena, but she was talking about you guys doing some experimentation with the whole digital fit thing at one point, and how people could walk into the mirrors and see themselves in these garments. And, when we moved to online, this advent of buying everything online, returns are such a massive expense in the industry. So be able to know how a garment fits in a virtual space and on you, for me, I'm like, man, that's the answer. Funny thing Lena says is, outside of that dimly lit, moody, cool retail store, when you're in the dressing room and you're convincing yourself everything looks good, in the virtual space, they were seeing themselves for exactly so real how they were, and people were having kind of an adverse effect to it. So there's this kind of brain thing to get over. It's like, wow, that's really how I see it. And I never even thought about that. It was funny hearing Lena say that could be a challenge for the future. Yeah. The truth of this is how I look,
Well, and and in that case, you can't feel it. Sometimes you can feel a garment and convince yourself, well, it might not look amazing, but it feels good.
Yeah. About two or 3 weeks ago, I was in a meeting with one of Europe's giant e-com, and they told me that in Europe, in some countries, in statistics, the data that they have is that returns are almost 40%.
Yes.
That's how for clothes, for apparel.
It is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't really think, okay, well, it's a return. They take it back and do it. In the old days of retail, someone would walk in the store, you'd get a return, you'd put it back on the rack, and you'd sell it. In a world where Amazon runs the game, or you buy it from home kind of thing, you have shipping costs back, you have warehouse fulfillment costs back, you have repackaging. Basically, the profit of a returned item is gone on a return in most cases, especially in our industry. So that is something that has to be resolved. And I think with many of the things that Browzwear brings to the table, the accuracy of visualization, with this whole open platform and the partnerships that are going on there, and with the improvement of LiDAR technology, the 3D scanning equipment, be able to really see how garments fit, and having some transparent conversations about how they fit, that could help that reduction in returns.
Absolutely. So, another conversation, Bret, you mentioned earlier how we had just had a conversation with Valentin Karabanov, an incredible designer.
I like to say Karabanov. It just rolls off the tongue really nicely.
Karabanov. It needs to be a song.
It does.
In talking with him, he started out as a traditional designer, moved into 3D adoption, and has now taken that one step further and is creating digital clothing that is seen in a virtual environment. Crazy. I know, Sharon, you've got a great relationship with him. I would love to hear your insights as to this space of digital fashions, NFTs and things of that nature. Do you see this being a viable economy on its own?
Yeah, I mean, the economy is changing so much, and I think we don't know what will come. What will be the next thing that will take. Fashion is always something that is trend driven, right? It's always it's emoting, all right. And digital is emoting. It's starting to emote fashion in a most amazing way, all right. And I think when that happens, then you unleash the creativity that is in people, and you'll never know what comes next, right? Val is, I think it's this week or last week, that he's. This is his second catwalk or virtual catwalk on one of the European Fashion Week. Where
it's like
he's
a Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week in Russia or something again.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, did he ever imagine that he would get there? That this would actually happen to him? No. But the two things that Val loved, music and fashion, the two things, and he's able to incorporate it. So there's this ability to express yourself digitally today as people thought was not possible years ago. So again, bringing this is available today. Now, please go out, bring your physical self, everything about you, and just express it. And then I think then how everything will come together, what kind of economy you will bring, you will never know. But look at Val. I mean, he's stepped out and he's been in the gig economy, building his studio, working with designers. He told me that he's worked at least with a minimum, I think last he told me almost 200 designers.
Yeah.
Now, where do you find, what an exciting job. What an exciting career.
And he seems to love it.
Yeah.
I mean, he just seems like he can express himself creatively. He can fill his day with what he loves. And, it was a really exciting conversation. It's so funny to think about with technology how, we're on a Zoom call, we can download an outfit, from Karabanoff Designs or whatever, and wear it in a virtual space.
Stay in your PJs, but look like you're wearing couture.
I know. Is that crazy? I mean, America always wants to nearshore the economy. Well, once we start building in pixels, I guess we can.
Right.
Right. It's kind of crazy. I think the
there will
future
be a space.
Is fascinating.
There will be a space for that. There will definitely be a space for that. And in the past we see, and look at today, you have key influencer that is launching, key influencer on social media that's basically launching their collection. They're going to need people to help them. I mean, they talk a good talk, they have great followers on social, and they love their clothes. I mean, clothes are, our apparel, it's a way of expressing ourselves, right? And take the KOLs, they were never... It was never even a term, okay? KOL, key influencers was never even a term, but today they launched their own fashion brand. When they come in, this presents a new opportunity for manufacturers, for designers, for pattern makers. This presents a new economy to work with these guys to bring a collection for them to launch, and they become the sellers. So I see it. I really love the gig economy. I find it so lively. I find new opportunities. I find how people express and then how people come together to collaborate and create new business. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, the combination of this ever-changing landscape and the gig economy and the technology that's supporting it now, it's all truly exciting what's before us in the future. Sharon, do you have any tidbits of wisdom or advice that you'd like to share for those who are wanting to get started and considering this technology of 3D design?
Personally, I would say that two advices for the corporates or for the enterprise, and then for the individual. We'll start with the individual because it's always about people. I would say that even for people, set a goal for yourself. Whatever is the reason that motivates or drives you to have to learn or to learn, just enjoy that learning process. And then more importantly, coming from a wealth of experience for people, for the fashion industry. When you come from a wealth of experience, whatever happened that made you force you into a change, let's put that aside. Realize that you still have a lot of experience. Learn something, learn digital, bring it new to yourself, but learn to embed it together with your experience. That way, it becomes an impact. All right, you're not just doing it for the sake of just learning something new, but when you can bring your own experience of product development, of design, what works, what doesn't work, and when you can bring it inside digital and you learn something and you embed it into your own mindset and your workflow, this is where it's really, really powerful. So I would say start with that kind of a goal in mind, incorporating your experience and embedding, learning enough to embed it into your experience. That's for the people. And then I think for the enterprise is the reminder that when you step into this, don't step into this thinking that here, let's give you a set of new tools right now, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, the 3D digital workflow would come out. No.
Takes time.
You work with your people, and more importantly is attach a goal to it as well. There are impact, at least address and articulate those impact, whether it's to your revenue, cost, or risk. Articulate this to your team of why you are doing this. Don't just tell them to do it because it's the new way of working. No. Why is this new way of working going to help the company or support the company in its revenue, in its cost, in its risk? Address business and economic topics, with your team, impact with your team so that they understand. And this drives ownership through the learning process, and this can actually shorten the time. I've heard of so many people that over the years have told me, we just get into this so enthusiastically because our company is so enthusiastic about it. We go into it, but we never change the process. So my bosses or my leadership is still telling me to do things the old way.
God, I've heard that over and over again, Sharon.
Yeah, and there's no change. So I think right now as we get started, start with the goal, start with some impact goals in mind, and then drive it down and continue to drive the change as your people change. Be prepared to also guide or work along with them to change your processes, and then to envision that type of where do you want to go, right? To
evolution,
really drive
not
it
revolution.
together. Right.
Evolve
really
the
drive
process,
evolve the process with your people, and you got to trust it. So if you can trust, the term today is a digital twin, which basically means the whatever you get in 3D, you got to be able to make it physically. So if you can establish the trust, then you can basically change your entire workflow. The number of companies I've seen that have jumped into 3D without even this basic understanding, and just make all kinds of pretty things. I remember talking to a Japanese sportswear brand. It's very funny, but I spoke to their European designer of how they, many years ago embarked into 3D, brought in a bunch of computer graphics studio guys to build their entire line really beautifully in 3D for the international designers and all to pick and select the line. And they were so happy with the process. 6 or 8 weeks later, the samples came in from the factories, China and all that. Oh my goodness. And she told me, I was shocked. It looked nothing like what I thought it was when I picked my style. And then we went into a mad scramble, to make changes and all. And she said that was such a bad taste that I felt that, no, I can't trust 3D. Now, to her, that's 3D. But to me, it's because you did not address why in the world are you presenting it beautifully if you can't even attach it to your physical process? Because what we want to do is be able to trust, make a decision. And because when you can make a decision, that's when all your time comes down, right? Reduce, and that's where agility really happens. If not,
Agreed,
you
and
just
that's
started a
built into
parallel
Browzwear.
process. Yeah, you just started
And that's
a parallel
built into
process.
Browzwear, the whole conversation about you're building it from a pattern file forward. Karabanoff talked about that, where, you know, he built this entire collection using his expertise as a tailor for this designer to hit a runway show in a few weeks in Paris. And the designer was able to experiment to wild degrees, create these wonderful collections. Valentin's like, I loved what I saw. And then the designer was like, okay, send the pattern files to the pattern house. And he was like, oh, I'm not sure. I mean, he was even, after so many years, he's like, are you sure you want to do that? And the fashion designer had such faith that he goes, sure enough, all of a sudden it goes to the fashion house. They make the garments. They look exquisite on the runway. It's about trusting that digital twin that you mentioned, and built into Browzwear, that actually occurs. So people love to hear a preview of coming attractions. I probably want to too. Is there anything you can share with us what's next for Browzwear without giving anything away?
We always give things away.
Look, no one's listening. We're a new podcast, so you can just tell me. I'll put my ear up against the microphone and you can...
No, I think...
I won't tell anyone, Sharon.
I love that. Well, I think we're continuing the journey. Every piece of technology and everything else that we built, you know, we will continue to put them, you know, in a way that people can scale and scale up much faster. We'll continue to help people actually manage that change into that workflow. And some of it will be developing some pieces of technology that actually helps them to be able to see and envision the workflow a lot earlier and then get on board. Especially joining, I think, bringing all the stakeholders together in a more automated and scalable way is where we've, you know, the next couple of years will be for us. Because while the, you know, DPC, digital product creation, is coming along and people are moving, the university and all the other things are supporting this growth, I think the next part of it is just helping company automate a lot of this process in order for them to scale up more significantly. This is already in the works for us. We've done that with releasing, for example, technology like headless. I think we released it maybe last year, and some of our customers have started to adopt it, learn to adopt it, with our help to actually automate their process so that they can do things, I think, scale up much faster than if they were to wait for, you know, get everyone on board before they could do anything. So part of the work of scaling up, automation and all is definitely things that you've seen us release, and we're continuing to help people to work on this as well. It just doesn't happen overnight. Just because I put a bunch of automation, I remember when we automated this, and in the tech world, everybody knew exactly what to do with it. And when we put it into the fashion world, the first thing people call, and I got so many calls, people ask me, so what is the headless? What do I do with it? So it's that education, you know.
Again, tech meets fashion.
Yeah, so it's automation, and I think scale up that is really going to drive the roadmap for Browzwear.
So very eloquently, you've told us nothing. You've not told us any secrets that we can share with the people. So great job, Sharon.
Well, she did share quite a bit with us today. Thank you so much, Sharon, for this wonderful conversation. If you too are looking to unleash your creativity in this space, we're going to make sure to provide a link to Browzwear in our show notes. You can, of course, reach out to us on our website at Stars Design Group or any of our socials at Clothing Coulture or at Stars Design Group. Thanks again, Sharon, for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe so you can stay apprised of upcoming episodes of Clothing Coulture.
Thanks, Sharon.
All right. Thanks, Albert. Thanks, Bret. Take care. Bye.